Hello, welcome to The Vaccine. I'm Casey Briggs. There are just 10 weeks to go until the biggest sporting event on Earth, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. How do you hold an event of that scale in a country that's living through a state of emergency? We'll explore that question this week, but before that, the 150 Australians booked on a repatriation flight from India have become 80 after 40 returning residents tested positive for COVID-19. Another 30 can't fly because they're close contacts. Those that can fly will return on an Australian government flight that left the country carrying ventilators and other medical equipment to help combat the crisis in India. The Qantas flight will return Saturday with those repatriated Australians that can fly to arrive after the government's travel ban lifts at midnight.
We are Australian citizens and we need to be protected. We need to be taken back from here. We don't want Australian government to create obstacles on the way, by way of caps, 40 to 50 passengers per flight, and then all sorts of other restrictions. I mean, get your act together, please. Get more quarantine facilities. I'm not saying that if I'm positive, you take me on the flight. I'm not saying that. But then, there were opportunities in the past. This is the third time my flight got cancelled. This time, first time for me being positive. But all this 11 plus months, I was negative. I was able to return, but I was not able to return because of the Australian government. And if I die, Australian government will be responsible.
Case numbers in India have dipped a little this week. The 7-day average is down, albeit still very high. The country is currently recording a 7-day average of about 375,000 cases a day. The country is now reporting more than 4,000 deaths a day, likely an underestimate, and close to a daily record set by the United States in January. And we're still seeing more than 20% of COVID-19 tests in the country coming back positive. That hasn't improved in the past week. It would ordinarily be one of the largest mass gatherings on Earth, but the 2020 Tokyo Olympics will look like no other. For starters, it's being held in 2021. Parts of Japan, including Tokyo, are still in a state of emergency. Nationally, the country has tipped over an average of 6,000 cases a day, and the curve is climbing. And vaccinations aren't rolling out that fast in Japan. The pace has picked up this week, but per capita, the country's actually administered fewer doses than Australia. For more on how these rising case numbers are affecting the Games, let's bring in our North Asia correspondent, Jake Sturmer in Tokyo. Jake, this will be an Olympics like no other. Can you talk us through the protocols being adopted to try and keep COVID out?
Indeed, Casey, they will be like no other. I'm here at a skateboarding test event today. It's one of quite a few that have gone on in the past couple of weeks to really give organisers a chance to test their coronavirus protocols and also how things are going to play out when the Games themselves begin, as they are planned to on July the 23rd. When we got here, obviously we're all wearing masks. Everyone is wearing a mask. We had our temperature checked. We washed our hands. The organisers request us to social distance. Come Games time, the athletes as they come, they will be tested every day. They will be kept largely in a bubble. They will go from their accommodation in the Olympic Village to their venue to a training area, and that is largely it. They will be kept in this bubble as much as possible. Their contact with the outside world limited as much as organisers possibly can. In terms of spectators, organisers have already made the decision to ban foreign spectators from the Games. The fear is that they could have brought mutant and variant strains into Japan, so that decision was made a few months ago. As for whether or not there will be any domestic spectators, that decision is yet to be decided. The coronavirus situation, as you mentioned, is not great here in Japan. Tokyo, the second largest city in Japan, Osaka, and today even 3 new prefectures have been placed under states of emergency. The situation is not going in the direction that organisers are wanting it to. So for there to be any decision on fans, the organisers are waiting to get as close to the Games as possible in the hope that they can use these states of emergency to try to get the situation under control so that they can have as many fans as possible. But at this stage, it's looking like 50% capacity at venues would be a best case scenario.
And how are the citizens of Japan feeling at the moment? Are they looking forward to hosting this massive event under the shadow of a global pandemic?
Well, if you look at the opinion polls, they are not. The majority, between 50 and 60% of people, according to the latest opinion polls, want the Games cancelled. So they are anxious at the idea that 10,000 athletes, tens of thousands of media and officials coming into Japan could bring variant strains and mutant strains with them. So they're particularly anxious, and of course, as the situation is so, the virus is spreading in Tokyo at the moment. The last few days cases have been above 900. They're anxious because that is putting strain on the hospital system in Osaka, in Western Japan. The intensive care units are almost full. There is a significant burden, particularly in Osaka. So as they are seeing the news headlines about the stretched capacity of the hospitals, people love the idea of the Games. The Games themselves are very exciting, but the practical reality, I think, has people worried. And you just have to see from the torch relay. I've been in Fukushima for the start of the torch relay a few months ago. There were no spectators there. Those who could come, there were no spectators at the start of the torch relay. There were some on the sides of the road for other parts of the relay. They weren't allowed to cheer, they could only clap. And that certainly, it was hard to kind of get the atmosphere you would expect from an Olympic torch relay. And also, in many prefectures, they've opted to take the relay off public roads because the virus situation is so out of control there. The idea of people gathering by the side of the road is too much of a challenge. So they've had to be held behind closed doors in a park. These were the sort of events that organisers would hope and would have used to kind of turn around that negative public opinion, but so far we're yet to see that shift. We've still got about 10 weeks or so until the Games. Whether or not things improve from there, I think largely will depend on what the coronavirus situation looks like across Japan.
Jack Sturmer in Tokyo, thank you. Let's bring in Tracy Holmes, one of our ABC correspondents who'll be going to Tokyo for the Games. So, Tracy, we've just heard from Jack that people in Japan not at the moment that excited about having the Games, but do you think the Olympic spirit will start to bubble up as we get closer to it?
Look, I know this is one of the things the IOC talks about all the time, and there has been a history of that. When people have been negative in the past, it has turned around once the Games begin, once countries start seeing their athletes competing. However, having said that, I think this is really, really different circumstances. We haven't been here before. We know that we had the Nazi Olympics in 1936. They went ahead on the eve of World War II. We know we've had the Munich massacre in 1972. In 1968, there were students shot dead just 8 to 10 days before the Games began. They were all horrific events in themselves. But this is different because it's a global pandemic and nobody really knows. You can put in all the infrastructure you want, all the details you want, but you just don't know if you're going to be able to succeed.
And life will be very different for the athletes on the ground this time around as well.
It's going to be very different on the ground. They've already delayed their lives by a year. But of course, there's all sorts of other things happening. John Coates is an IOC Vice President. He's the most senior IOC member helping the Tokyo Organising Committee get these Games on the road. I asked him recently about this petition that gathered 300 signatures in about a week asking for the Games to be cancelled and whether that's a concern.
I think that a large reason for that is the slow rollout of vaccines in Japan. We are able to run the sport competition in an Olympic bubble without interfacing with the Japanese public. We've got to get that message through to them. Our participants aren't using public transport, aren't going to hotels and bars unless they've done, in the case of, say, media, until they've done their 14 days of coming through and being tested, and then only on the basis that they fill in an activity sheet and can be traced as to where they go. So we're taking every possible measure. We've just got to better explain that.
Yeah, so taking every possible measure, but nobody really knows whether that is 100% foolproof. We'll just have to wait and see. Let's bring in one of the Australian Olympians who is heading to Tokyo. Jo Brigden-Jones is a kayaker who's had to put her life on hold. She's also working as a paramedic. Jo, good to have you here. How do you feel about heading to Tokyo with all of the discussions taking place about the rate of COVID infections, about every athlete having a vaccine, etc.?
Yeah, I guess we're in 2021 now, and looking back to when the Olympics got postponed, the Tokyo Olympics in 2021 seemed like forever away, and now we're getting really close, which is pretty exciting. But there obviously is still so much talk about COVID, Japan, the Olympics, and how it's all going to unfold. I think I've learned over the past year that there's so many uncontrollables. For example, coronavirus and how everything's unfolding and how the world's changed. And all I can do is focus on myself and control how I'm training and how I'm preparing for the Olympics, and just fingers crossed from all the athletes that the Tokyo Olympics can go ahead successfully and everyone can stay healthy and safe.
I've heard from a lot of athletes around the world, and a lot of them basically have your perspective, although we've heard recently from quite a few of the tennis players who say they're thinking twice about heading to Tokyo. But they're in a unique bunch. They come from an Olympic sport where they have a professional circuit. They earn a lot of money each year. They will still have their Grand Slams. But for most Olympians, they're in a situation like you. You don't make a living out of your sport, do you?
No, I don't. I have always had to have a job to go alongside my sport, because we don't earn much of an income. We do earn some funding, but it's all results dependent, but it definitely is below the minimum wage. So everyone in my team, we all have a job. I work as a paramedic. I'm doing 24 hours a week of work. And for us, the Olympics is massive. It's what I've dedicated my life to for the last 20 years. So yeah, people say like, oh, it's just 1 year postponement, and you know, the Olympics are every 4 years, but for us, it's huge. And like you said, we're not a professional sport. And I think we will see a lot of athletes who are from those professional sports where Olympics isn't the pinnacle for them. They probably will think twice about whether they go to Tokyo or not. But I know in my position, I 100% want to be there. It's going to be my last race as an athlete, and I've just dedicated so much to this, so that's why it means so much to me and a lot of my teammates and the other Olympians.
The vaccine is starting to be rolled out now for all of the Australian Olympians, but many other countries as well, those that have access to a vaccine. Have you had yours?
Yeah, I had my vaccine about 5 or 6 weeks ago. I got mine through work because I'm a paramedic, so I was in category 1A, but yeah, I have noticed that it's quite a slow rollout. I think if I was working in Sydney at the moment, I would have got my vaccine a lot longer ago, but the rollout in regional areas has been quite slow, and yeah, we've kind of seen that progress, and the Olympic team members have been vaccinated this week, which I think is fantastic because we are going into a high-risk country, and you know, I know there's been a lot of talk about whether, you know, the Olympians should be vaccinated ahead of other people, but you know, we are putting ourselves in that situation. It is our choice to go over there. But like I said, we've been preparing for 10, 20 years for this. So I think it's awesome that the government's backed us and provided us with these vaccines. And, you know, it's important because we want to protect ourselves. We want to protect all the other athletes from every country who go to Tokyo. We want to protect all the Japanese locals. And, of course, we don't want to bring the virus back to Australia.
And what do you say about the members of the general public that are thinking it's not really right that athletes should get special treatment? It's just a sport. It should be delayed again. What's your reaction? And I don't know if anybody actually says that to you in person, or it's just kind of these rumours that circulate around you.
I think it's really tough because I don't think those people quite understand what we put ourselves through. You know, I train 3 times a day. It's more than a job for us. We literally dedicate our lives to it. So another year's postponement, I probably wouldn't make it a year. My body would give up on me, and probably my mind too. I've just put so much into this, and we make sacrifices every day, and it's hard to think that people, you know, just consider, oh, this is just your job, or it's just, you know, part of it. You should just cancel it. It's, you know, I've got a lot of close family and friends who fully do understand, you know, what I do and how we put our life on hold and why it is so important for us.
Thanks very much for joining us today, and good luck in Tokyo.
Thanks, Tracy.
And thank you, Tracy Holmes. Good luck for you in Tokyo when the Games do commence in about 10 weeks' time.
Thanks.
Well, we'll continue to check in on the preparations for the Games as the opening ceremony approaches, but that is the show for this week. Join us again next time. Bye for now.